So today's session on the GLocal Evaluation Week, we'd like to cover a title from evaluation to decision making, and then how the REDD Plus reserve-based payment study supported the continuation of this climate finance line in the GCF. So before we get into the session itself, I'd like to briefly introduce today's panelists to present and presented by four panelists. I will start from the very left to right. So it's Jeehyun Yoon, who is the evaluation specialist of the Independent Evaluation Unit, IEU, of the Green Climate Fund. And then followed by Martin Dellavedova, who is the director of SISTME Monitoring and Evaluation. And followed by Booyoung Jang, myself, who is the researcher of the GCF IEU, and Andreas Luhmann, who is the head of the GCF, also from the Independent Evaluation Unit. So you can all now say just briefly hi to everyone. So quickly, I'll jump into the objective of today's webinar is that also we'll first to explore how independent evaluation conducted by GCF IEU, especially in particular for the Latin America and Caribbean evaluation, as well as it's a special study on REDD Plus reserve payments payment in at Latin America region. And then how this special study as well as this evaluation were able to provide key evidences to shape its learning and the accountability as well as dialogue within the fund, and then how this were able to inform the decision making process. And then also we'd like to share our analysis on our main findings as well as the recommendation and how this had a role in shaping a new policy, and then what is the like kinds of brief implications for the future shaping of the climate finance. And before we have a deep dive for the content itself, we actually prepared a brief interactive session using Mentimeters. So you can see the QR code or the URL called menti.com, and then you can enter the 8-digit code there. So you can get into the Mentimeter session that we have prepared for you. I'll just give about 20 seconds. We still are some people entering, maybe 30 seconds. So you can just scan the QR or you can enter the code, and then we will put the stage open for your like participation on this. Hey. I guess pretty much everyone, not everyone, pretty much like all of you who would like to join should be good to go. So let me just switch my screen into the Mentimeter page. Okay, so here is the one. So I will jump into the very first question for everyone. Well, first, this is just very kinds of like a meet and greet. We'd like to know who are our audiences, and then we'd like to know like what's your level of knowledge or level of confidence you might have on what REDD Plus is, or like how it's positions, like how it takes places in the climate finance. So like maybe some of you know this fairly well, maybe something, well, I think I've heard of what REDD Plus is, or some brief ideas, or maybe like not much. So that's why I'm here. Therefore, I can learn about this. Okay, I see actually fairly even contribution of, okay, that, that's good to see. I'll just open this for about a few more minutes so we can see. Okay, so I see like fairly good group of well knowledge, somewhat like not much. Okay, so let's aware that this is how we are composed for today's session. Good to
There are
know.
many colleagues
Okay,
from FAO and UNDP which are
okay.
in charge of the Red Plus project, so that's why the
You
fairly
definitely
well
raised.
is winning.
I see. So that definitely like raised, escalated our average level of knowledge. So we definitely expect your inputs or feedbacks or maybe like any commentaries afterwards because we also prepared that session for you as well. Okay, just quick, very intro, simple question. So I brought like two key words maybe we might like to maybe deal with for not only for climate finance but also for the Red Plus itself. What do you think it's more valuable? Like, what's your more like take priority? Like, should we focus more on the carbon we avoid emitting, or should we focus on more on the forest that we keep standing? Like, ooh, I see some balances over there. Yeah, just well, because we have like a variety of audiences with a variety level of red pluses, we'd just like to see your like initial ideas or like a quick comes like what comes to your mind, like what's more of a forest or like the carbon wise. Okay, okay, well, I see some of those were not able to answer, which actually goes to a fair point because there is, well, like our point to present this question is there's no single slash correct answer. So, like for people who answered or people who were a bit hesitant to answer, you all did it fairly right, I'd like to say. So yeah, I mean, carbon definitely gives more technical perspective. It's more of we can make more measurable or reportable or quantifiable approaches, like focusing on the carbon. It also like prioritize for the red plus the RBPs as well. But meanwhile, the forest, it gives a more like the holistic view, I think, because like the red plus what's this is actually about the like preventing deforestation, like how to conserve it more sustainable way. So like we see forest more like a bigger like a view, like go beyond the what can be quantified itself. Like it's more of like a means to sustainable support biodiversity, cultures, water, territory, etc. So yeah, that's pretty much just the quick ideas of what this might be about. So okay, that's actually where your knowledge can be presented very well. How would you like to describe Red Plus in like one words or like a short like description? So I see already someone put for standing, caring, recognition. Well, yeah, this I'll just open it for next like about 30 seconds to 1 minute. Yeah, what comes to your mind? It doesn't even have to be very fancy or anything. Plus co-benefit, reforestation, forest standing, caring, yes, for sure. Recognition. I wish I can put something. Time to be. Okay, conservation, for sure. Okay, I still see there are few people, okay. Commitment, nation, caring. Okay, so yeah, definitely for forest management, care, conservation. Yes, I see actually this is pretty well relevant with what we'd like to talk today. So I'll just, hey, thanks for keep tree forest commitment. I'll just give about 10 more seconds and I think we can just go to the next page. Caring, conservation, forestation, reduction, yes, missions. Okay, thank you everyone. I'll just stop here for now and then get back to our slideshow. So for today's session, well, as we just give us some ice breaking or like a easy session, so we'd like to focus on the what would be our five like leading questions, as which also will be your like major takeaways for today. So first is pretty much definitely what is REDD Plus reserve-based payment and why does it matter for the GCF and the climate finances? And then which goes to second, that focusing on what have you learned and how does the GCF engage and then invest in local context, especially in the REC region. And then we'll cover that also what have you learned from this, how does this GCF invest in REDD Plus reserve-based payment? Goes to a fourth question, oops, sorry, from evidence to policy. So like the evaluation and its founded evidence, it actually just not ended up as evidence itself, but how it actually were able to inform and shape the following and relevant decision makings, and which also goes to the reflections that what power do evaluation had, especially in climate finance hold, and then like implication, like how can we unleash it? So it will be actually great to keep those questions in mind as we go further. So we can start from just a brief overview of what the REDD Plus reserve-based payment, and then why does it matter for the GCF climate finance, and then I will also give a brief overview of the relevant pilot project that GCF had took the place in the REDD Plus RBP. So we can start from the just very direct visual overview. On the this is actually is the source from the World Resource Institute, shows the latest trend in global forest loss and deforestation. So if you see there's a really like a big upheaval on 2024, which actually nearly doubles from like 2023. And then you see that these red areas are actually lost to fires, which means those has been actually big or huge scale wildfires driven by mostly human activity, but as well as climate change, as the year was actually marked the hottest on record last year. But actually, I'd like to focus more on the green area. If you see, like it actually has been fairly steady pace in like a loss percentage wise. So this actually green area, so if you see over there, this is close to other drivers, which actually so-called AFOLU, or the agriculture, forestry, and land use. So those are the pretty much like a steady, take the steady portion of the forest loss. And then that's actually where also account for 23% of total net anthropogenic or the human caused emissions of greenhouse gases reported by the IPCC special report. And then therefore there we identifies the REDD plus, so-called reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, which is the activity with the largest potential for reducing AFOLU emissions. Just a quick note then why this is not just REDD but plus, so because I just had actually my own personal questions on this. So this actually plus stands for other than just this REDD, but additional activities cover sustainable management and ongoing conservation to protect this forest and its carbon stocks. And with this REDD Plus process and then framework actually was moderated by the UNFCCC, and then with divided into three process like phases. And then here, like I'd like to briefly introduce is that GCF provided support for this each REDD Plus phases for like a proposed REDD Plus program. So there's a 3 pages is actually for the readiness and then implementation and then the payment for result. So this phase one called readiness is actually the phase that the country or the entities can design strategies and relevant action plans and capacity building, and then how to plan for implementation. And that's actually GCF the modality, so-called Readiness and Preparatory Support, or RPSP program, which actually is the funding available for the building for institutional capacity for this phase, mostly provided in forms of grant or technical assistance, and then followed by the phase 2 implementation. And those are actually the part that they can propose the action plan and strategies, and then how like they can like build their proposals. So that's actually that GCF were able to support the country slash like the entities to prepare the funding proposals through the PPF, or the Project Preparation Facility Program. And then they can prepare funding proposals accordingly, and then it can be assessed in the GCF board meetings on regular basis. And then the phase 3, which also will be our like a main point of focus, is that payment or result. So this actually the where they can present the result, which can be measured, reported, and verified for their performance-based financial incentives. And then that's actually where it comes, that is result payment based payment comes in. So for this actually to put in action, GCF actually took the pilot program for this REDD Plus result-based payment since started from 2017, and the plan for last for 5 years until 2022. But it's only targeting countries that already finished the first 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2, during the period of 2013 to 2018. And then they actually are the eligible ones who are able to apply for this pilot program funding through the program. So just quickly note that not all actually REDD Plus proposals were included in this RBP, like REDD Plus RBP pilot program. And then here is just a quick geographical brief. Then, so GCF implemented this pilot program, and which country was covered for this program. Then you can see there are actually 8 countries on the list, and then definitely you can see that 7 of them are in Black region, except Indonesia, like in the Asia Pacific region. And then so that's actually also like leads to that the special study focused on the REC region. So like what happened after pilot this program took place? Well, definitely you see like this REDD Plus RBP program became the key parts of GCF support for forest protection, especially for countries which had reserve reported for the UNFCCC. And then by 2022, which was the expected closure of this pilot program, REDD Plus RBP became one of the most mature and tested funding lines. But there still has been uncertain like concerns or were raised by the time when the funding for this pilot phase actually was exhausted by slightly earlier than its expected time. And then at the board meeting on 2020, I think B25, the board asked the secretariat like to analyze like whether to continue this funding modality. So there has been internal debates definitely, which comes to the closure of the pilot project. And then even the countries themselves also had concerns about the absence of a defined strategy for REDD Plus RBP going forward. So yeah, this is just a brief context of what this is about and why did it matter and how it took place in GCF. Now I will hand it over to the next session, that what have we learned out of this. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Booyoung. My name is Jeehyun. I'm an evaluation specialist in the CCF IEU. So good morning and good evening, everyone. Could you move to the next slide, Booyoung? As Booyoung talked just before about the GCF engagement for REDD Plus, especially REDD Plus RBP, I will briefly present the independent evaluation of the GCF's investment in the Latin America and the Caribbean region, which is our REDD Plus RBP pilot was concentrated. This evaluation was conducted in 2024, and it was kind of GCF's first regional evaluation. We had the previous evaluation focused on LDCs, Cs, and African states, but it was more focused on the vulnerability group classified in the UNFCCC. But the LAC evaluation was tried to find how GCF works relevantly and effectively in the perspective of a specific region. We don't have time to talk all findings from this evaluation, but I will highlight 3 key conclusions, relevant conclusions from this evaluation. The first one is GCF has its own value proposition. Particularly, GCF engages with the direct access entities. It's the basic principle how we approach to the country and partners. And the GCF takes its income agnostic approach, which means binding less with the income levels, unlike MDBs, which are allowing various financial instruments like grants and loans to support climate action needed. LAC countries, they themselves clearly recognize this, but this value proposition has not been fully realized in the region. For example, in terms of direct access, 75% of the CCF project financed through international accredited entities, only 25% with the direct access entity in the region. And secondly, there are gaps in understanding the capacity that already exists within the region. So capacity, the region has decades of experience in programming and implementing environment-related projects like including REDD+. But GCF has its compliance-oriented accreditation approach that couldn't leverage that existing local expertise and institutional strengths. And lastly, the evaluation found that success cases and some challenges in coherence and complementarity. REDD+ RBP actually were the success cases mostly, demonstrating alignment with international norms like Warsaw Framework, as well as in national REDD+ strategies. And also, we found that the project was mostly co-financed or aligned with other national or other donors projects. But there are some limitations like regional platform or fora exist, but not systemically supported to coordinate within these initiatives and learn each other. So this is 3 main key findings from the evaluation. In the next slide, so in this evaluation recommended, based on these findings, the need for more clear value proposition of the GCF to the region and a strategical approach to realize this value proposition in the region. And the contexture-based and the flexible and country-specific approach in the LAC region is needed. In this context, REDD+ RBP special study was conducted as part of this evaluation for several reasons. First of all, the special study was an opportunity for us to look into several areas of evaluation, such as how coherence and complementarity was realized on the ground, such as how REDD+ RBP leveraged existing capacity in the region. At the same time, as Booyoung said, it was an opportunity to contribute to GCF discussion on the policy of REDD+ RBP. As we saw from the presentation, 7 out of 8 countries of the pilot was in the LAC region. This made the region a natural focus of examining the outcomes and lessons of their pilot. In 2024, when we were conducting the evaluation, the GCF board continued discussions on the future of the REDD+ RBP policy, and the evaluation aimed to provide evidence and insights to support those discussions. So with this, I'd like to hand over to Martin for more details of the special study, including the findings. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeehyun. I'm Martin Dellavedova. I'm the SISTME's director. As Jeehyun was saying, this evaluation was commissioned by the GCF board in the context of this review of the REDD+ RBP policy. pilot policy. What the goal of this evaluation was to generate independent and rigorous evidence on the implementation results and lessons learned from REDD Plus projects funded under this window. This evaluation also aimed to identify best practices, challenges, and recommendations for designing a future REDD Plus RBP policy, and Andreas will talk about that later. And was a regional special study, but with focus regional but global implications. And it covered the 7 countries that Booyoung mentioned before in Latin America: Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica, Chile, Ecuador, and Paraguay. The team, we analyzed key documents for each project. We included the proposals, the progress reports, the GCF secretariat briefs, the board meetings, etc., etc. We interviewed more than 130 different stakeholders, accredited entities, government officials, indigenous communities, implementing agencies, and GCF technical staff. We applied the theory of change approach in the whole region, identifying outcomes, causal mechanisms, and critical assumptions. And the findings that we got were compared across countries to identify common patterns and context-specific differences. So what we have found during the study: firstly, we have confirmed that REDD Plus RBP projects has proven successful in channeling finance to countries that have demonstrated measurable progress in reducing deforestation and forest-related emissions. These result-based payments not only recognize past efforts from the countries, but also provide incentives for continued climate actions and forest conservation. Most projects under this modality support a variety of interconnected objectives that contribute to the sustainability and long-term impact of the interventions. These objectives were some projects promote the development and institutionalization of robust, transparent, and country-owned national forest monitoring systems, which are essential for measuring, reporting, and verifying emission reductions. This system really increased national technical capacities while fostering accountability and international credibility. In addition, REDD Plus RBP projects emphasize the creation and implementation of equitable benefit sharing mechanisms that ensure financial and non-financial benefits reach those communities that contribute most to forest conservation. And this is important. This includes indigenous peoples whose traditional knowledge and stewardship played a vital role in protecting forest ecosystem. For example, in Costa Rica, UNDP and FONAFIFO have directly transferred millions of dollars to indigenous communities in the countries as payment for conservation through the national payment system, payment for environmental services system mechanism. This is usual. Many countries, the indigenous communities mention that they receive just a small part of the benefits that they create with their way of being and living. And in this case, the funds are received directly by the communities. In addition, those funds received through this result-based payment are frequently reinvested in actions that further enhance forest governance, protection, and restoration. This includes activities such as reforestation, sustainable forest management, capacity building, and strengthening of legal and institutional frameworks. And finally, the stakeholders value these REDD Plus results because the results-based payment modality creates a strong incentive for countries to invest in reducing deforestation and forest degradation, knowing that measurable, verified results will be acknowledged and rewarded as GCF has done. So this direct recognition not only builds trust in the international climate finance mechanism as a whole, but also reinforces national commitment to climate goals and forest protection. So many features of the REDD Plus RBP modality stands out as good practices, and they could also serve as model for other funding lines and climate finance instruments, particularly in these areas that I will mention. There's strong country ownership. This REDD Plus RBP places national governments and their institutions at the center of planning, implementation, and reporting. And this fosters leadership, long-term engagement, and alignment with national development strategies ensuring that climate action is not donor-driven, but rooted in national priorities as well. Also, payments are strictly tied to independently verified emission reductions, which creates transparency and accountability. This results-based logic increases the credibility of the mechanism and provides a model of how international finance can be effectively linked to concrete climate outcomes. And I will analyze the criteria that we use, all of the ones which are in this call, used to evaluate projects. And regarding the effectiveness and efficiency of these projects, all evaluated projects meet the minimum technical standards set by the GCF. Effectiveness was high in terms of compliance with the eligibility criteria for results-based payments. However, efficiency varied between initiatives. Some projects face significant delays in approval and disbursements, while others showcase good practices in interagency coordination and operational planning. Regarding the emissions reduction achievements, all countries reported emission reductions validated by the UNFCCC technical bodies. In total, over 100 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent were verified, with payments made for approximately 92 million tons of carbon dioxide at the GCF standard rate of US5 per ton. Remember this US5 per ton because we will use it later. However, in many cases, the volume of emissions reported was significantly higher than the amount actually paid due to the financial limits of the pilot. The total pilot was 500 millions, and they were distributed among the 8 countries. Most countries demonstrated robust institutional structures with established national coordinated entities and prior experience with REDD+ programs. As Booyoung showed at the beginning, there are 3 different phases. There were some key weaknesses included limited technical capacity at subnational levels, not at national level, but at subnational levels, high turnover of key personnel in the project's staff, and coordination challenge with indigenous people in some of the countries. The indigenous peoples and local communities were also included. Our study identified notable efforts in several countries to include these local communities in project design and validation process. However, it remains room for improvement in implementing some social safeguards, establishing more systematic participation mechanisms, and ensuring transparent benefit sharing. Finally, despite the success in verified results, there are sustainability risks, and these include the continuity of funding beyond the pilot, some reliance on external financings, and weak long-term incentives to prevent deforestation. There is also a clear need to strengthen transparency and accountability mechanisms to reinforce trust among stakeholders. And now it's over to you, Andreas.
Thank you, colleagues. Greetings here from Songdo, South Korea. My name is Andreas. I'm tasked with a very interesting question at hand, and the question was, how did we manage to go from evidence to policy? So I hope to keep it very concise and tight, but I really wanted to reflect on a couple of things that happened throughout the process of this evaluation that Jeehyun had presented with the luck evaluation and Martin with the special study as part of that luck evaluation. So you see on the next slide, there's the first item that I really want to bring closer to you, and that's the question of context. And context really matters. In this case, it's not necessarily the local context I want to talk about, but the policy context. So the new REDD+ results-based payment policy was approved in October 2024, just in time when the evaluation on the luck and the special study was in its full course and was delivered. So this new policy really replaces the 2017 pilot, and really marks the transition from the regularly financing modality to and the relevance of a pilot program onto a new policy that would describe a full-fledged, a bigger program as such. So you see this here on your right-hand side. So I basically tried to describe a little bit the different aspects that happened at the board throughout the years. So we had very early on in 2017 at Bay 18, that launch of the pilot. And then there were several decisions and discussions at the board that were very very striking for us as evaluators to see that there were repeated discussions about what does it mean, REDD+ results-based payment? How can we reinforce this pilot in the GCF and through its policies? So we found ourselves in this policy context, in this emerging need and demand for more clarity and for better understanding. And I think that's really key, because it really made us find ourselves at the end in this context where board members were repeatedly addressing the IEU, the Independent Evaluation Unit of the fund, with these questions about effectiveness, efficiency, and relevance of the pilot program in order to take the next step and the next decision. So drawing from evaluation experience, evaluative evidence that we had from the past evaluations, and a quick review of the portfolio, the IEU really proposed to provide a special study alongside the implementation of the LAC evaluation. The reason for this is clear. You've heard it already from Martin and from Jeehyun. 7 out of the 8 countries under the pilot were in the LAC region, so there was a very strong hold for this to be done in parallel with the internal discussions of how to bring about a new results-based payment modality for REDD+. That would encompass a wider set of questions. So another important point that I want to make here is this study was not a project evaluation of individual projects. It was really instead an attempt to bring forward the common findings and lessons that we have for all of the projects in the LAC. What does that mean? That means that these projects were at different stages in implementation, and thus the lessons that we could draw from each of the projects were very relevant and nested in their context, in their particular individual context, in their stages of the project life cycle. And that made it quite interesting when thinking about this from 3 perspectives. And we used the special study really undertook an analysis at 3 different levels. It looked at the corporate level, where it was really looking at the terms of reference of the pilot, the mandate that was given to the GCF to basically finance the relevant international frameworks, such as the REDD+ under the UNFCCC. It was then also looking at the national priorities from a corporate level perspective. The second level was to really look at the country level, to really cover the structures and the institutional mechanisms at the national level that need to be there to manage results-based payment projects for REDD+. And Martin was basically speaking about this just a minute ago, to really reflect on the findings that we had there. And the last level was really the beneficiary level. We also wanted to cover this question about non-carbon benefits that were implemented at community level. Again, the findings are very clear and striking with regards to the inclusion of local communities and indigenous peoples. So in a way, quite an interesting context in which this was nested and how we had to frame this study in the political context that we were in. On the next slide, you see basically a description of the questions that we ask ourselves in the unit here. So we had to put the question of the utility and the use of the evaluation at the center, and ask ourselves on how can we relate to this. And as a result of this conversation, we chose to adopt an adaptive evaluation approach, which is really an evaluation approach that's designed for complex, dynamic, and uncertain environments, really emphasizing the need for real-time learning, for flexibility, and for that iterative decision-making process to really understand and improve the relevance, effectiveness, and impacts of the interventions that we were looking at. So unlike the traditional evaluations that often assume more a linear approach and an approach that really does not look too much at the context and the emergence, the concept of emergence of information, we really had to use this new approach of an adaptive evaluation. What does that mean in the real world? So how did it pan out in the exercise? So there are key components to adaptive evaluations. Some of the components is flexibility. That's one of the key components to really look at the evaluation design and the methods that need to change and adapt as we move along with the context. There's this question of real-time feedback. So we need to have this continuous data collection and analysis to inform decisions as we go through that implementation or discussion at the policy front. We had to have a very strong stakeholder engagement, so an ongoing collaboration with the stakeholders to really shape the evaluation process so it's meaningful for the discussion that was held at the secretariat level as well as at the board level. And we had to have that learning focus. So really need to emphasize the learning and the improvement rather than the accountability. This picture that you see in front of us is a graphical description of what has happened. So we really looked at the interconnectedness of three main parts. And I really tried to simplify this here in this graph. So we looked at the user engagement. So basically the involvement of the stakeholders and the users into the evaluations. And the user engagement really enables the timely feedback loops and the relevant timely feedback loops that keep users engaged as well. Because you don't want to do this in isolation. You really need to have this link. So from the timely feedback loops, we really delve into this question of how can the feedback loops help identify the emergence, and the emergence, so the adaptation to the evaluation to the change, leads to a more targeted feedback loop in itself as well. And that's basically that were basically some of the key methods or key considerations that we had to go through in the implementation of this study on this evaluative process. A very new thing for our new office to say, okay, we really need to go far closer to our stakeholders and reduce that view of accountability and really put forward the learning component of the evaluation. Okay, so now leaving this little excursion to the methods of evaluation, let me go back a little bit closer to what has happened and what we have done. So on the next slide, you see what really has happened then in the decision process. So how has the evaluation shaped that discussion? And what's really important to recognize is that independent evaluations for us here at the Green Climate Fund really serve three functions, and that's the function of accountability, learning, as well as dialogue. And I wanted to speak a little bit about this. So when we looked at this, one of the most distinctive aspects of this evaluation was this close connection to the ongoing decision-making process. So the study was really requested by the board. It was developed in parallel to the GCF internal discussions, and also looking a little bit forward to how could a modality really be situated. So it was an interim product that really helped the secretariat, but also the board, to really look through this thing, through the evidence that was basically produced in real time. The evaluation evidence was also instrumental because it was showing that despite the operational challenges, the funded projects had really generated real and measurable results on the emissions reductions, and that was a key point that led to a lot of changes for the new policy. It really helped to validate the results-based payment process for REDD+, and as an effective tool that was implemented here at the GCF. Also, several recommendations were very, very important for the discussions for the new policy, and that included the strengthening of safeguards. I know Martin has already mentioned that, but just for the completion here, the strengthening of the safeguards, the inclusion of local communities, the need to improve the accountability mechanisms, and the adjustment of the payment logic to promote really greater equity and sustainability. And on the next slide, you will see how this was translated. So this is the very last slide that I have for how to bring to you this. How did we see this emerging in the new document? Well, we made a check and we said, okay, how many of the things that we have identified in the evaluation were really then also reflected in the final policy? And there we go. The most significant changes was the price per ton for CO2 reduced, which had increased from $5 to $8. The flexibility to accept results from a jurisdictional and as well as subnational level, under the clear verification conditions. So that's really very closely nested to what we've been finding at the subnational level, and Martin has just spoken about this. The question about transparent benefit sharing mechanisms, and which include indigenous peoples and local communities. Again, a clear finding and recommendation that had come out of our evaluation. Also stricter environmental and social requirements prior to the funding disbursement to really look at some of the insufficiencies that we had identified in the previous evaluation. And lastly, also looking at accountability and the need for the right documentations of funds that had been used. So this is, in a nutshell, giving you a little bit of where we came from in terms of the process, how this then had manifested in our findings and recommendations, and how this manifestation has then also been reflected in the final policy. I hope you found that interesting, and I'm really happy to talk to you about this further after we finish this lovely presentation. Over to you, Martin, for the closure.
Thanks, Andreas. Yeah, to finalize, this study clearly demonstrates how evaluation have an impact beyond knowledge generation. It can shape institutional decisions and reconfigure public and financial policies, as Andreas was saying. Some key lessons from this evaluation. One key lesson is that timing matters. The evaluation was carried out precisely when the GCF needed inputs to redesign its REDD RBP policy, enabling meaningful interaction with decision makers. Another critical success factor was the methodological rigor of the study, technical robustness, the diversity of sources, participation approach, and institutional independence all contribute to the credibility of the study. And in multilateral contexts like the GCF, and many present here, there are diverse interests and political dynamics intersect. The evaluation can act as a neutral space that organizes evidence, reduces uncertainty, and facilitates consensus. Some of the uptakes of the study recommendations were supported by transparent consultation process and by recognition of concrete experiences from the countries involved. To finalize, the REDD RBP case offers a powerful example of how evaluation can not only improve specific interventions, but also sustain entire lines of climate finance over time. As detailed in policy document GCF B40, the new policy explicitly acknowledged that the IEU study was fundamental input in transitioning from a pilot program to a regular modality integrated into the GCF project cycle. So this type of evidence not only validates what worked, but also helps identify necessary adjustments to move forward and to move toward more equitable, effective, and sustainable mechanisms. And the next slide, that's the last phrase, is in a world where climate finance decisions must be both fast and legitimate, rigorous evaluation can and should be a strategic ally. And from this, I pass to Booyoung. And as Andrea said, we are eager to hear from you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jeehyun, Martin, and Andreas. So this pretty much marks the end of the presentation that we prepared. And then here is just a brief information I like to share later. I'll just, let me quickly get back to our Mentimeter. So you can either, so we'll just actually open for your inputs and questions, commentaries. So feel free to like upload your questions in our chat rooms, or you can like raise your hands to like giving out the questions, or I will also open back to our like a Mentimeter site. So we can actually also do some more anonymous interventions if you like to involve in. So I know some people actually joined a bit later. So here I'll just quickly share the menti.com, and there's a 4-digit number you can join for this. And then, yeah, so 8455-1897. And meanwhile, yeah, just, yeah, get reminded where we are also getting the question from you as well. Okay. So yeah, either Mentimeters or jet looms or whatever like your preference, please feel free to throw your questions or comments or like any kinds of the takeaways you'd like to share with others. Also, yeah, a quick reminder that we also shared all the referred like documents or the evaluation documents and report, and even this newly implemented GCF policy for REDD RBP. You can access to the original documents if you like to see like the further details or like any like further information you like to dig into. Yeah, there are the resources available we shared on the chat list. Okay, there are several questions already received. So, okay, can you start from the very first one? So, what are the prospects for future funding given the current situation in the USA? I think that's definitely pretty frequently asked questions in the field of climate funds. Would you any of our panels would like to respond to the question?
It's a more political one. It's all yours, Andres.
See, I did policy and now I'm doing politics. Colleagues, great for that question. Great to see that question. There's no straightforward answer other than all the climate funds are currently undergoing replenishment, starting with the GEF, and adaptation fund is coming soon, as well as the CIVs. And you obviously can imagine that the GCF is very eager to start its process as well. So we don't quite know yet what that would look like in terms of replenishment. But we are replenished so far until 2027. So we're going ahead with projects and with the project appraisal for this year and next year, and then so goodwill we have a replenished fund thereafter. But we're certainly aware of the situation. So I see that, and I get a lot of questions also internally. It's hard to say for the future. I hope this helps, but thanks, colleagues.
Okay. Okay. So did you visit all 7 countries in person or any feedback on the national-wise systems or commentaries? Like the Martin, do you think? Yeah.
4 out of the 7 countries. We visited Argentina, Ecuador, Costa Rica, and Paraguay. And we did virtual calls with Brazil, Colombia, and Chile. I'm not sure if we should compare between, I mean, I think we are comparing them in the report. All national systems work, which is a good thing to know. And they have been working before GCF involvement. They have been working because that's why what these projects paid were the job done between 2013 and 2015, if I'm not wrong. So the systems worked before GCF got involved. All of them worked. The Costa Rica one is the best one and how it works because it's been a long time doing the same. And it's really well organized. The other countries are much bigger, right? I mean, that's also to be fair. I don't know if you want to say something about this, Gio or Andreas, in addition.
Yeah, Martin, I want to add that if the national system is already exists and well established, the better the system, longer and well established, the better REDD RBP project was successful, because the recognition is important from the ground. Local community, indigenous people need to understand the concept of REDD+, the compensation based on ecosystem services. And if you invest the time and effort for them to understand and adapt to this approach, that is, I think, the success factor for the REDD RBP projects. Thank you.
Thank you. We still several questions to be answered. I see actually maybe some of those questions might be answered like as a whole, like instead of like having one by one. Just quick question. Yes, we can access to the full report in the IEU official websites, or you can just refer the link that we posted on the chat room on that. And then application of, so is there any specific like question? We can start from like the how like IEU
Yes.
covers this, evaluation in the board, and then what is the following up things. I think that's pretty much covered like the how we can utilize the IEU evaluation. So over to you, panels.
Yeah, the board, we definitely
Presented,
have
yes.
presented the evaluation at the board. Yeah, usually all evaluations are actively considered, which is great. We've got that culture right, so the board is looking at evaluations quite actively. But I must say, I mean, look, I think the success for this evaluation uptake is far more in the connection to the development of the new policy, and I think that process was equally important, not only the process to inform board, but also to be with the secretariat and help them understand and think through things. So, you know, I think it's coming back to these three functions. Is an evaluation there for accountability? Is it there for learning? Is it there for dialogue? Hopefully for all three at the same time. And I think the learning component here is a little bit more with the secretariat and has helped to shape the policy document. But a great question.
We may like able to just continue for like, I think might be relevant to this one. Like how about like all the study evaluation conducted by IU were able to provide basis for learning and replication and scaling of other GCF project? Pretty much relevant, yes. Any like additions on this?
That's an excellent question. It's not so easy to answer. I think one as an evaluation office, we're really committed to think about uptake of evaluations, again, beyond the board. Also, as you said here, for the project design and implementation of projects to understand what works, what doesn't, and for whom. The issue that we have with this is that we're not always able to convey that story to all different audiences that we intend to address and reach. So I feel, unfortunately, I fear that we were not yet able to disseminate the evaluation results in more detail to help learning for replication and scaling of our projects. It's a great way to hold us accountable. We as evaluators, I'm saying, we should be thinking about this far more. We haven't. Honest truth, we really haven't yet. This question here, should I take this as well? I mean, the colleagues, if I
That'd be great.
continue.
Yeah, just briefly. Yeah, we actually are actually almost 10, but we may just can answer just a couple of questions waiting, and then we can, I think, just jump to the final remarks to wrap up.
Sure.
Yeah.
On the midterm and final evaluations, that's interesting too. This is with the portfolio management team at the fund. So we're not involved in midterm and final evaluations ourselves. We're there to help and support that work with methods and if needed any type of advisory function, but we're not ourselves involved. So we're not underdoing this. But the second part of this question, to say if we're using it for evaluations, absolutely, yeah. So whatever we find and whatever has been submitted to the fund is also things that we would love to look at. And in fact, we have looked at some of these midterm evaluations, final evaluations not so much, but midterm evaluations for this study. And this evaluation, and as well as other evaluations. So that's a good point. It's 2 points here. Yeah.
I think this pretty much marks our quick last question that maybe we can briefly share like what probably regional evaluation would like to take places in future.
Yeah, the decision is with the board. The board in its wisdom will let us know what it wants to do and which evaluations it wants to see. So the IEU is presenting evaluations to committees as well as to the entire board to get the buy-in from the board. That's important. We organize usually our evaluations alongside the board work plan. That's for policies and for any other items. We also undertake learning evaluations, which could be regional evaluations as well. We're currently not scheduling any additional regional evaluations due to the recent restructuring of the fund. So maybe that's just worth saying. We recognize that there is an evolving context here at the fund where regional desks are established for all the regions and the sub-regions. So we're hopeful that in the future we can provide such regional evaluations to also help these colleagues to rethink and think through their strategy for certain regions. But as this is just about to be rolled out, we're holding back such an evaluation for perhaps 2027, not this year and not next. Interesting question. Colleagues, it's been great. Maybe
Yeah,
Booyoung,
thanks.
back to you.
So yeah, pretty much this marks our like a very closing of the session today. Thank you for sparing your time to be with us. It was great pleasure to like accompany with you for the webinar. There has been a quick contact information both for IEU or SISTME. So please like feel free to reach any of those contacts if you have any concerns or questions. Like we definitely are more than like pleasure to hear from you. Thanks for your time, and then hope you enjoy the rest of your day and hope to see you somewhere again. So this marks the end of the session. Thank you for the panelists, and then applause for all of us and then all the attendances.
Thank you, Booyoung.
So thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks to all of you for being here.
Colleagues, stay in touch. If you want, please reach out to both of us. Thank you. Bye.